All right. Well, welcome everybody. Good evening. Welcome to our third and final class for this February 2022 spirituality series on Kabbalah Made Simple, how to understand Jewish mysticism and apply it to your life, sponsored by Temple Sinai's Adult Education Committee, chaired by Jill Namiro. Jill's with us tonight and has been with us. Jill, good to see you. Good to see everybody. And for those of you who aren't with us live right now, we look forward to you enjoying the recording that we are making of this. So our first two classes at the beginning of February, we covered a lot of territory. And what I've been trying to do in this class is, as the title says, help us understand Jewish mysticism and apply it to our life. So we're going to focus on that B part, applying it to our life. That's going to be our focus on tonight, putting it all together. We've looked at some major principles of Jewish mystical tradition, and I'm going to give you one more tonight, one more biggie that if I did not go a little bit more in depth, I would be remiss, and I would have to repent during Yom Kippur for not sharing this major feature of a Kabbalistic thought and principle. You all know it, you know bits and pieces, but I'm going to give you a really, well, you may know more than bits and pieces, but I'm going to give you a great description of it by Rabbi Lawrence Kushner tonight, which is in our handout. But let's talk about the four principles that we did look at before we talk about now applying this to our life. The major principle we've been talking about in the past two classes are the 10 sefirot, the 10 emanations from God and the creation of our world that are part of the structure of reality. The 10 sefirot, again, sefirah is literally means number, but we can think of it as attribute, quality, emanation, power. It refers to all those things within God, God's self. These 10 attributes are part of God, according to Kabbalah. They're also part of us, created in God's image. They are also part of the structure of the universe. So the Kabbalists had a very grand scheme in the 10 sefirot. This is none other than the structure of the universe itself, the structure of God, the structure of us. And so these 10 sefirot are primary, foundational to any talk about Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism. We're going to spend more time looking at the sefirot, applying them to our life tonight. We also talked about briefly four worlds. Mapped onto the 10 sefirot are these four parallel worlds or universes that the Kabbalists talk about. They map directly onto certain 10 of the 10 sefirot. And as we talked about them, the Hasidic tradition, which is very much a Kabbalistic tradition that psychologized a lot of Kabbalah, a lot of these principles, and made it a part of human psyche and human personality. Four worlds, as we know it today, I think a good way to think of four worlds of Judaism and Kabbalistic thinking of four worlds is the spiritual world, the intellectual, cognitive world, the emotional world, and the physical world, the world of the body. And we'll talk again, maybe a little bit about that tonight, but that's another major principle that maps directly on to the 10 sefirot. And as we talked about, the Tu B'Shvat Seder is very much addresses those four worlds in a Tu B'Shvat Seder. So those are two biggies in Kabbalah. The third big thing that we talked about was God's holiest name, the four-letter name of God, represented by the Hebrew letters Yud, He, Vav, He, which we don't pronounce. We say Adonai, which literally means my Lord, but that four-letter name of God occurs thousands of times in the Jewish Bible, hundreds, if not thousands of times in the Torah. It's God's holiest name, and to the Kabbalists, that name of God, understanding the significance of God's holiest name, it also helps us connect to the sefirot, help us understand the structure of reality and how God functions in this world. And just to, again, review it on one foot, that four-letter name of God is a combination of, and it's in Adon Olam, the song Adon Olam, Hoveh, present, Haya, past, Yehiyeh, future. So one way to understand God's holiest name is that God is the source of past, present, and future. If you change the order of the Yud He Vav He and you just move around those 4 letters, you get Havaya. Havaya means existence itself. So one way we can understand God's holiest name is God is the source of existence, or God is existence itself, which leads us to the 4th principle we've looked at in this series, an understanding of God, that everything is in God. Everything in the universe, anything that exists in the world and in the universe is within God. And the technical name for that theology is panentheism. Literally all is in God. And we're going to look at that today too in one of the practices. So those are the 4 major principles we looked at. Panentheism, everything is in God, the meaning of God's 4-letter name, 4 worlds, and the 10 sefirot. And we're going to add a 5th principle. And just to plant a seed, if you've looked ahead in your handout, you will see it is none other than the great Jewish value of tikkun olam. The rabbis talk about it in the Talmud. It's in the prayer Aleinu. The Kabbalists, particularly Isaac Luria, specifically Isaac Luria, a Safed Kabbalist in the 16th century, he creates a whole mythology. It's another, the word that's used is a myth about the creation of the world, similar to the 10 sefirot. And it is Isaac Luria that we are indebted to the concept of tikkun olam, the way we understand it. And we're going to look at that more in depth tonight. But let's jump directly into practices, because tonight is all about making this practical, applying this to your everyday life. So if you look on your handout on page 2, and I encourage you to have givurah, have self-restraint. Don't read ahead about what tikkun olam is all about, because you're going to lose what we're going to talk about now. So you need to exercise givurah, self-restraint, and don't look ahead, because I wanted to say paper, although this is virtual, but I put tikkun olam right underneath these 6, 7 practices. They're really 7 practices. So don't look ahead. We'll get there. Let's start with number 1. First practice, a Kabbalistic practice. And again, these are practices that I've collected and some that I've created. But when I think about Kabbalah and studying it all these years, which I've probably been studying it for over 20 years or so, these are some of the major takeaways that how I apply to my life, and see if this works for you too, if this lands well for you. Let's talk about the Shema. We talked a little bit about it last class, but we're going to talk about it more, using the prayer, the Shema, as a spiritual practice and deepening our understanding of what the Shema means. And so I'm calling this Shema in nature, a la Moses Cordovero. Moses Cordovero, if you can see that on page 2, number 1, Shema in nature, a la Moses Cordovero. Remember, Moses Cordovero was also a Safed Kabbalist in the 16th century. He was Isaac Luria's forerunner. He major Kabbalist. Moses Cordovero's got to be on everybody's top 3, top 4 Kabbalists. He prolific writer, made everything understandable, and has got really great ethical teachings, applying Kabbalah to ethics as well. So we looked at a quote from Moses Cordovero last week. I shared it with you again this week. You don't have to look. I will give you the highlights, but it is on your page 7 about non-duality. And Moses Cordovero, again, he was one of the major panentheists, that everything is in God, major panentheist in the Kabbalistic tradition. He wrote, Ein Sof, the infinite one, God, the infinite one, Ein Sof, literally without end, exists in each existing thing. So God exists in everything that exists in this universe. He says, do not say, this is a stone and not God. Rather, all existence is God, and the stone is a thing pervaded by divinity. A stone is God. A stone is pervaded by divinity. A stone is part of God, not all of God, but it within God. Panentheism, within God. Everything is within God. So with that idea, I want us to consider the Shema. When we say the Shema in synagogue or we're out in nature, I'll talk about in nature in a second, that when we say Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel, understand, Jewish people, understand you, Yisrael, a God wrestler. Understand that Adonai, that four-letter name of God, that Adonai is our God, Adonai is echad, is one. What does oneness mean? And to a Kabbalist, particularly to Moses Cordovero, it does not mean that there's only one God in the universe or that there are no other gods. That is all a given. He would take it a step further and say, since everything is in God, when we say that God is one, we are saying everything in this universe is one with God. Everything is one with God. I'm hearing a little bit of background noise. I wonder if somebody, if folks could mute. I'm hearing sort of a chime. Does anybody else hear that? I wonder if everybody could just mute and just sort of.
Rabbi, if you make me co-host, I can take care of it. I can
Okay,
mute people if you like.
sure, Susan. Are you under Philip's name?
No, under mine.
Okay, that's right. Philip is with us. Hi, Philip. I can't see everybody on the screen. There's Philip. Okay. So thank you, Susan. So when we say the Shema, when we think the Shema, Moses Cordovero would have us take to heart, Shema, take it to heart, listen, really take it to heart, understand everything is one in God. Everything is one in God. I think the best way that we can maybe bring that to our everyday lives is to walk outside and walk among nature. I know we have a lot of nature, people who love nature and people who love to hike. To be walking outside, to see the trees, and to know that those trees are giving us oxygen, that we are exchanging. They're giving us oxygen, we're giving them carbon dioxide, and that we are breathing each other. We are one with trees. No trees, I don't know that we have enough oxygen to live. So we are one with trees. That is a scientific fact in the sense that we rely on trees to exist. So we're connected with not only with trees, but can we see a la Moses Cordovero and the idea of panentheism? Everything is in God, that we are also connected with the sky. We are connected with other plants and flowers. We are connected with other human beings. We are connected with animals. We are connected with that stone that is pervaded by divinity. We are connected with everything on this planet, and maybe even connected with things beyond this planet if there's some way that whatever is out in space, Seth, I'm not sure, is somehow reaching us and we are absorbing it and assimilating it into our bodies in some way. So I want to talk about that. So to me, that's the first practice, is to go outside and to feel connected to everything, to feel connected to everything in this world. Does that seem hard to do? Have you ever felt that way? That you felt connected to nature in that way? Feel free to raise your hand. And yeah, Bernice, I see your hand. I'm going to ask you to unmute. Did you want to? Yeah. Okay, Bernice, are you able to? Did you want to say something? Oh, you're trying to unmute there. There we go. Hi. Yeah, Bernice, have you had experience of feeling sort of at one with something in nature or another being, or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
being outside, I was this morning,
Yeah. And you sort of felt that connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's easy for us to feel separate. It's easy for us to feel separate. And even as we had talked about Art Green, a great modern day Kabbalistic scholar and teacher and author of many books about Jewish mysticism, he says, when we think of creator and created, there's this distance, there's this separation. A better way to think about it is deep structure and surface. God is the deep structure, we're the surface. Or another way to say that is, you may have heard this in other circles, God is the ocean, we're the waves. God is the deep ocean, God is the expanse of the ocean, we are the surface, we're the waves. We're not separate. And therefore, if everything is in the ocean, let's use that metaphor again. If the whole natural world is, in a sense, the ocean, we're a part of that. We're a part of that. Even if we're a wave, even if we're at the top, we're still a part. We're still connected. Mike, did you want to say something, or am I?
Yeah, I think when I'm hiking and away from everything and everything's silent, but you can still hear animal sounds and all that kind of stuff, that's when I feel it.
Yeah. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, a Hasidic, great Hasidic master, said, when you pray, go out to the fields and pray. All the grasses will join you. So again, this idea of being connected to the natural world, feeling spiritual, feeling connected, feeling united with that. There's a reason the psalmist, a lot of the nature psalms talk about the grandeur and beauty of the world and God being a part of that. And there's a reason that in the Zohar, we talked about the Zohar being like the Bible of Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism, the major text of Jewish mysticism. The Zohar uses nature imagery left and right. And the idea being that this is a way that we can connect with these ideas. These are ways that we can connect with God. These are ways that we can feel that sense of unity that the Shema, speaks of at this very deep level. Yeah, thank you, Mike. Yes, Seth?
A long time ago, I was hiking back in the Angeles National Forest. There's a thing called the Brown Mountain Debris Dam, which is there. It was built in the 30s, I think, by the Civilian Conservation Corps. And it must have been early spring because there was enough water behind it that the wind coming off of it was blowing a mist over the top. And of course, the sun was behind that, so I got a rainbow. And I know that there's a prayer that you say when you see a rainbow, and I couldn't remember it, but I remember that I looked up at that and I just, took a deep breath and I said, "Good job, God."
Nice. I'll tell you what, that prayer, Seth, is as beautiful as the traditional prayer for a rainbow. That prayer that you said, it's from the heart, it's spontaneous, it's as beautiful as whatever the rabbis created for the covenant of the rainbow. I'm going to throw out ideas. I offer them to you as a practice. Try them out, experiment, see if you connect with it, if it lands well with you. If not, then don't pay any attention to it. So how about this? Going outside one day, maybe even on Shabbat, Shabbat when things may be at a slower pace, go out into nature, go outside, maybe recite the Shema, or maybe look at something in your surroundings outside that really fills you with awe, that really makes you, say, wow, good job, God, like Seth was saying. And after you have that moment, maybe think to yourself, everything is in God, and then recite the Shema silently to yourself, or even out loud if nobody's around you and you're comfortable doing that. But take that in, feel the connection, experience the connection. Maybe say everything is in God, and then recite the Shema. and see if that deepens the rest of your walk. So that's one practice to try out, one way to include it in your daily life, these ideas. Number two, this is a big one. I want to spend maybe 10, 15 minutes on this one. May not be able to get it all done today, but I'll just maybe sort of sum up a little bit more in depth. Others will touch upon and for further study. Number two practice, manifesting the 10 sefirot in your life with personal modern day kavanot. Kavanot is the plural of kavanah. Is anybody familiar with that word kavanah? And if so, I encourage you to put that in the chat box. What is your understanding of the Hebrew word kavanah? Sometimes use that word. It's a great word to know. It's a great Jewish mystical word. It's a great Kabbalistic word to know. Kavanah. To do something with kavanah. The intention. Yes, intention is a great translation of kavanah. The intention that you put into your prayer. It talks about praying with kavanah, praying with intention, praying with concentration, praying with, we could use the word mindfulness. Kavanah is a great word, that'd be a nice way to understand mindfulness. Attention, intention, concentration, kavein, the root of the rubric of the word kavanah, kavein, literally means to direct, to aim, like aiming an arrow at a target. So that's where intention comes from. So what Isaac Luria did, again, this great Kabbalist in 16th century Sfat, is he created kavanot before doing a mitzvah and create an intention before doing a mitzvah, similar to what a bracha is. A bracha is a kavanah. If you say a bracha before doing a mitzvah and you say that bracha with intention, with attention and focus and concentration, and you're totally absorbed in the words of the bracha, that's a kavanah, that's an intention. And you're getting ready to do a mitzvah and you're saying, I'm getting ready to do a mitzvah, lighting the candles, getting ready to eat, getting ready to do something, wash your hands. Any bracha really is a kavanah if you do it with the proper focus and heart to it. But what Isaac Luria did is he created other kavanot that related to the sefirot of, back to the idea, unification. It's all about unifying things and oneness. To unify the sefirah of Tiferet, which is sort of inside God, and it's sort of the masculine side of God, like the groom, and unifying Tiferet with Shekhinah, which is the final sefirah, and to unify the male and female aspects of God, the groom aspect of God and the bride aspect of God, and to bring those two together in this sexual imagery to be a creative force for good within God and within the universe, and to allow God's Shefa, Shefa is a word that means flow, to allow the divine flow of God's blessings and God's goodness into the world. So what Isaac Luria said is, before I do a mitzvah, in addition to the bracha, I am going to say something along the lines of, may this mitzvah, I'm paraphrasing now, may it unify HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is Tiferet, another name for Tiferet, with Shekhinah, and then to do the mitzvah. So I want to take that principle and say, well, maybe we're not going to use that imagery. Maybe we can. I mean, if you want to use that imagery, go for it. But we can do our own kavanot that resonate with us today. And so here's what I mean by that. So if you take a look in your packet at page 3 now, the next page, and page 4, we've got to remind us again of the 10 sefirot. I want to start with page 3 and if you'll bear with me, I've got this on my screen. I want to share my screen so I could sort of use my pointer, my mouse as a pointer. All right, great. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes.
So what you've got on page 3 and page 4 of your handout, again, are the 10 Sefirot, their names, their descriptions, some nature imagery, again, nature imagery to help us connect to these principles, these theoretical principles. The 10 Sefirot. We've got the word will. So the top Sefirah, a sense of having a sense of will. Then going from right to left, wisdom, understanding, love, power, judgment, beauty and compassion. I'll add a little bit to Netzach and Hod, eternity, triumph, and victory. This comes from page 4, Art Green's description of Netzach. Hod, splendor or thanksgiving or gratitude or acceptance. And then as we go down, foundation doesn't make a lot of sense, but truth or shalom is another way to describe this 9th Sefirah. Truth or shalom, peace. And then number 10, presence, earth, the people Israel. So taking these 10 attributes, and let's start with, I want to start maybe with wisdom and understanding. How can we bring more wisdom and understanding into our life? How can we bring more love and power and strength and judgment in a good way, meaning exercising good judgment and discretion, self-restraint, power in the sense of self-restraint, temperance, good judgment. How can we bring more love and good judgment and self-restraint into our life? How can we bring into Tiferet harmonizes Chesed and Gevurah? Remember, you've got two polarities which have value, but in the middle, when you harmonize them and balance, almost like Musar, you find the sweet spot. How can we create beauty in our lives through the harmonizing of love and good judgment? How can we bring Netzach, more perseverance? How can we bring more sense of wanting to change and transform things for the better into our lives? How can we bring more appreciation and acceptance of things that we can't change in our lives? More truth in our lives, more peace in our lives, more presence, God's presence, our presence in the world. How can we do that? So my suggestion is the way that a Kabbalist would do this is to contemplate the Sefirah. Focus on wisdom. What does it mean to bring more wisdom into our lives? Maybe study some Torah or Talmud that talks about wisdom. And so you reflect on it, you contemplate it, you understand it cognitively, back to the 4 worlds. Let's understand it cognitively, and let's embody it in our lives physically through our actions. And so one way, to do this is to study it, and then maybe even pray. God, may I bring wisdom to this next experience or this challenging situation that I have. May I bring wisdom into this next meeting that I'm going into that may require some wisdom. May I bring understanding to the next thing I'm about to do, or this challenge or this difficult thing I'm about to do. Just understand the difference between wisdom and understanding. The way the Kabbalists understand it, wisdom is like that point. Remember, it's like a point, and so it's a point here, and then understanding is more of a womb or a palace. It's a receptacle for that point. So if wisdom is a flash of insight, let's think of wisdom as a flash of insight. Well, you want to pay attention to that flash of insight, but you want to let it sit. You want to let it gestate and become fuller and more developed in the womb. So you bring that insight, that flash of, of an idea, and you reflect on it, you contemplate on it, you flesh it out a little bit more, and you develop it more. And so those two are working together. So may I bring wisdom and understanding, both wisdom and understanding, to this situation that I'm going to be facing. How can I bring more love into my relationships or into the situation I'm about to enter? Do I need to balance my love with good judgment? I don't want to be overly loving and become a doormat to somebody. How do I stand up for myself? How do I exercise my power as well as my love? So that's in balance, to create this harmony at Tiferet, to create something beautiful through that love and through that power and good judgment. How do I create something beautiful in this relationship or in this action I'm about to do? God, may I be more loving to this person that I know the relationship is strained. May I stand up for myself more in this relationship that is strained in that way. May I bring more gevurah, more power to the situation. May I bring more love to it. Remember too, and I think Art Green does a great job with this. Art Green says that, we want to balance love with everything else, but he says love should predominate. We should lead with love in our actions, in our relationships, in the way we relate to the world. Let's lead with chesed, but balance it. And if it's out of balance, we'll measure our love. We'll measure it. We'll restrain it with gevurah. But let's let love lead the way. He as he says, love isn't everything, but it's one of the most important things. So can we spend some time praying and focusing and contemplating and reflecting on how to be more loving? So I think that's a way to use the Sefirot to apply it to our own lives. And a way to do that, again, is look at the descriptions that you have here by Danny Matt in his book, The Essential Kabbalah. Look at these great descriptions by Art Green that also flesh out. I think, I use them both. I combine Danny Matt's description with Art Green's description, and I use them together to reflect on these qualities. These are qualities to bring to the world. These are great attributes to bring to the world. They're not the only attributes, but in the Kabbalistic system, they're the 10 main attributes. How can we bring more wisdom and understanding and love and power in a good way, and good judgment and balance and beauty with that, and transformation, and wanting to change things for the better, and accepting things and that we can't change, and showing more gratitude and appreciation, and more truth and more peace at Yesod, and bringing that into all of our actions, and bringing that into our presence, and receiving people's presence. So let me stop there. That was the idea, to manifest these 10 Sefirot more in our lives by reflection, contemplation, study, prayer, meditation, action. What do you think? Any questions, thoughts, comments about that? Would anybody like to share with that practice? Yeah, Jill, please.
Well, I always learn so much from you, Rabbi. And I just love what you said about, I have a meeting tomorrow. How do you do this? Come up with the right thing at the right time. And I'm a little anxious about it. And but now I realize I'm going to ask myself those questions. How can I bring wisdom and understanding to the meeting? I mean, I kind of do that anyway in a meeting, but I've never really phrased it that way before.
Yeah.
It's just a really beautiful way to say it. And it's a really nice way to ground yourself and to get rid of any kinds of stress or anxiety that you might have for approaching a difficult situation. Yeah, that's really a neat way to approach, situations at work, at least, I think.
Well, great, Jill. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And wishing you a wise and understanding presence in that meeting. And, another way to do it too, and thank you for bringing that up, because as you know, I always learn from you too. And so in framing it as, in one way it's framing it, how can I bring more of this? Another thing, it could be aspirational, is to enter that meeting, and even during the meeting, at times say, may I bring wisdom to this meeting? May I bring understanding?
Yeah.
Maybe even putting that on a sticky. These kavanot, can also be visual. So maybe putting on a sticky, if you're able to put a sticky somewhere, may I bring wisdom and understanding to this meeting?
It's really interesting you should say that, because I adopted that practice right before my dissertation defense. I was really nervous, and I said before I went in, God, may I say the words that you would have me say, and the words you would have them hear. And then I went into my dissertation defense, and according to my chair, I aced the defense. So I think just saying that kind of put a calm over me, and I just was asking God, please let me say what you want me to say and what you want them to hear.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And what's great about too, Jill, just to share with everybody too, and then Ruth, we want to hear from you too. Thank you for volunteering. Let's remember the word Kabbalah literally means to receive. And what one is doing by opening oneself up to this, either through a prayer or asking a question, or a may I, which to me is a prayer. May I is just like a Baruch Atah Adonai in some ways when you're asking for something. So by doing that, you're putting yourself in a state, hopefully, of receptivity to open yourself up to the divine that is flowing within you. It is there. We are manifesting something that is there. It's almost like the wave coming out of the ocean. It is that wave is manifesting in that moment. And so by making ourselves receptive to the manifestation of these qualities that are built into us, according to Kabbalah, this is inside of us. It's a matter of bringing it out and sharing it and offering it to others. So we're helping to put ourselves into a receptive state. And as our tradition says, it's almost like what we say during the high holidays. When we want to do teshuvah, the smallest act of turning that we make, one of my favorite lines during the high holidays, God says to us in our tradition, if you just make a turning as small as the eye of a needle, God says, I will widen it so much that you can drive a wagon through it. Like a stagecoach wagon. So eye of a needle to a stagecoach wagon. God is with us there to assist us when we make that turn. So what we're doing here is we're turning to these qualities that inside of us. We're asking for the divinity within us and the divinity outside of us, if everyone to look at it, to help it manifest.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Sure. Thank you, Jill. Thank you. Yeah, Ruth. Thanks for your patience, Ruth.
So I think some people know that I have a sidewalk library, and I get donations as well as I put some books out. And I have had some Latinx men working, cleaning my trees of all the dead growth to clean them out and make them healthy. And I talk to them and ask them, do they have a girlfriend? Yes. They have a wife. Do they have children? Yes. And so I got out all the children's books that I have received and gave each of them some of the books to take home with them so that they could read to their children. And it just was a natural thing, It's nice that I have it out in front, but it's nice when you can give it and that maybe they don't have books at home for their children. And so this was such a gift, and I was so grateful that I thought of it.
Oh, that's awesome, Ruth. What a mitzvah, and what an exercise of chesed. If you look at Art Green, again, Art Green's got great descriptions. I think Danny, Matt, and Art Green, you sort of use them together, but Art Green's descriptions are phenomenal. Generosity, open-heartedness. So you were exercising your chesed, your loving kindness, in creating this outdoor library. What was the word used for it?
I call it a sidewalk library.
Sidewalk library, yeah. So
Mhm.
the sidewalk library is an act of chesed for your neighbors and anybody who walks by. And then, by the way, that reminds me, I could have put this as number 7 or 8. We did this a little bit with character strengths when we would talk about character strengths. The strength spotting, you could call this sphirot spotting, right? When you spot in somebody else or yourself exercising a sphira here, when we're seeing that Ruth is exercising her chesed, in her sidewalk library, and Jill is exercising her chokhmah and bina, in her meeting tomorrow. To be able to name it, to be able to name it, it brings it. You've got more ability to use it by labeling it. So that's another practice that you could do in addition, trying to manifest these qualities. So hopefully, and by the way, thank you, great examples. So hopefully this gives you a sense of how the number 2 practice works. I had mentioned I really wanted to get to a main one. So I am going to try in the next 10 minutes, just to get us to 8:30, and do practices 3 through 5 in 10 minutes, just to sort of give you a little taste. And then I want to save the last 30 minutes for, again, this idea of tikkun olam, which is so incredibly powerful, and ways to do tikkun olam at different levels. So let's talk about prayer now, regular traditional Jewish prayer. At number 3, the v'ahavta, right? Love God with all of our heart and mind and soul and being. In the Hasidic world, this means loving God's world. This means manifesting our chesed, manifesting our ahava, our love with other people. And the great line from Martin Buber that he says from his Hasidic studies, anybody who tells you that they love God, but they don't love other people, you know they're a liar. If they are not manifesting their love for God in other people, and we'll extend that to all beings, if we're not manifesting our love for God in loving other beings, then we're not loving God according to the Hasidic world and the Kabbalistic world. So spending time with the v'ahavta prayer, looking at it, looking at the English, and thinking about it in terms of, how am I expressing my love in this world? If I'm doing that, I am fulfilling the v'ahavta prayer. So that's an idea for that. Lecha Dodi, when we sing Lecha Dodi, that is a Kabbalistic hymn that came out of 16th century spot from the brother-in-law of Moses Cordovero himself, Shlomo Alkabetz. He talks about in Lecha Dodi, that is a metaphor where, and I'll put this up on the screen, I've got my Kindle going. So let me show you. I want to share with you, if you have Kindle, you can get Mishkantaphila on your Kindle for a low price. Can everybody see my screen? Yeah. So here is my Kindle version of Mishkantaphila, the prayer book that we use in the sanctuary. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, beloved, come to meet the bride. Beloved, come to greet Shabbat. So the bride is Shabbat. We are, in a sense, the groom. The Jewish people are the groom, and the bride is Shabbat. But God is also the groom, and we are the bride, the community of Israel, because we are Shekhinah. In this situation, God is the groom. We are Shekhinah, the community of Israel, which is on that list of Art Green, community of Israel for Shekhinah. And Shabbat is Shekhinah. Shabbat is Shekhinah, is the indwelling presence of God in the world. So when we go to greet Shabbat and we sing Lecha Dodi, what we are greeting in addition to Shabbat is we are greeting the indwelling presence of God manifest in the world. That's what Lecha Dodi is asking us to do. This is a Kabbalistic, completely created as a Kabbalistic idea. And again, it's the linking of Tiferet, the groom aspect of God, with Shekhinah, the bride aspect of God, the male and female, uniting male and female. Lecha Dodi is all about that. Okay, so to think of Lecha Dodi in that way, as it's intended to be meant. The Amidah prayer, and you'll find this in your handouts on the next page, page 5. I'll just put this up here briefly. Did I stopped my screen share? So I'm going to share my screen again. I'm going to go to this one. Can everybody see my screen again? Great. So this is what Art Green does with the Amidah. If you have, if you know the Amidah, the Tefillah, HaTefillah that we do, the heart of Jewish worship, the first prayer talking about Abraham and Sarah and all the patriarchs and matriarchs, it speaks of God's love. It uses the word chesed. It uses the word ahava, literally translated as love. So when we pray the Amidah, we're dealing with the Sephirah of Chesed, God's love, God's flowing love toward us, overflowing love. The second blessing is called Givurot. There's Givurah. There is that Sephirah, God's power manifest in the world. The power that we can do it as in God's image of how we can manifest our power for good in the world. Netzach is a little bit of that too, about transforming the world and making it better. So Netzach has got that sense too, but it's in Gevurot. I want to go down then to the fifth blessing, Netzach, again, as Art Green describes it. This is our striving to perfect the world, Tikkun Olam, which we're going to talk about. But any way that we transform the world for the better, when we do the blessing called Avodah, which is about, prayer and service, that can be thought of as the Netzach Sphira. When we do that Thanksgiving prayer, that prayer that I love toward the end, Hod, meaning beauty or splendor or things along those lines. Also Hodaya, as Art Green says, it's linked to Thanksgiving, gratitude, appreciation, acceptance. So when we do that Thanksgiving blessing, we can think of that that Sphira of Hod. And then we normally end with Shalom Rav. We can think of that as Yesod, foundation. Everything above it is channeled through Yesod. So we think of Yesod, we can think of, Shalom, all of these, getting all of these in balance and using all these attributes to the best of our abilities. And when we pray Shalom Rav, we can think of, manifesting all these Sphirot and bringing peace to the world and peace within ourselves. And having that peace, generate that peace into the world. When we sing Shalom Rav, we need to be an instrument of peace, right? So Yesod is going to give us that imagery to bring that peace into the world. And then what Art Green did is he put Shekhinah into the weekday blessings, which we don't do during Shabbat, but anyway, you can look further and we can talk, if you have questions about how Shekhinah works with that. But anyway, praying the Amidah, thinking of the different Sphirot. We got 2-3 minutes. Any questions about how then to bring the Sphirot and our knowledge of Sphirot into our prayers? Any questions or comments about that? All right, well, let's move ahead now to the fifth major principle that like I say, if we didn't talk about Tikkun Olam, we're not talking about Kabbalah. We've got to talk about Tikkun Olam. And again, it's in the rabbinic tradition. It's in the Aleinu prayer, which precedes Kabbalah, maybe a little bit around the time of 12th century. I think they put the Aleinu prayer around the 11th or 12th century during the Crusades, and where it talks about L'taken olam b'malchut Shaddai, to perfect the world under God's sovereignty. So you've got that L'taken olam in the Aleinu prayer. We don't usually say those words during Aleinu, but it's in the second blessing. It's in our prayer book. It's turn the page and you'll see L'taken olam b'malchut Shaddai. So you've got the words Tikkun Olam right there in Aleinu. And it really was Isaac Luria who took this idea, the Sphirot, of God creating these emanations to create the world, Ein Sof, entering the infinite one, entering the physical world. Isaac Luria takes that, he takes evil, and he just does something remarkable with it. So yes, Susan.
What does L'taken translate to?
So L'taken, literally to repair, to fix, to improve. Yeah, and Olam, the world. Yeah.
Well, the Tikkun Olam I knew, but I think of
L'taken is the infinitive, the verb infinitive.
Okay.
Literally to repair, to fix, to make better, to improve. L'taken is the verb form, infinitive verb form, to do something, to repair.
What I was thinking is the 10th graders, when they go to DC, isn't that program called L'taken?
Exactly, and they're getting it from the Aleinu prayer. And it's obviously another way of saying Tikkun Olam, and it, because it's a verb, it's an action. L'taken, to improve, to do it, to repair it. All right, so let's go back to page 2 underneath our practices. We're going to practice number 6, to do Tikkun Olam through mitzvot and environmentalism. Maggie, if I was thinking of you, if there's a better word for environmentalism, but we'll get there. We'll get there. But I want you to think about if there's a better word for environmentalism in this context. So here is Tikkun Olam according to Isaac Luria through the voice of Rabbi Lawrence Kushner, not to be confused with Harold Kushner, but Rabbi Lawrence Kushner, Reformed rabbi who has written many books on Jewish mysticism and neo-Hasidism. And his book, by the way, I'm recommending this book to you, The Way into Jewish Mystical Tradition. It's a fantastic book. It's an easy read, and he does a great job in 3 paragraphs of explaining Isaac Luria's very complicated concept of Tikkun Olam. And thanks, Maggie. So care for our world, definitely. Yeah. I like that better. It's got more heart into it. It's got more, it's a more powerful way to say it. Environmentalism sounds very abstract and scientific, and care for our world. That's a great way to say it. So Tikkun Olam through mitzvot and care for our world. So who would like to read on page 2? We'll take it 1 paragraph at a time. We'll stop if there are questions. But who would like to read Isaac Luria's concept of Tikkun Olam, 16th century, through the voice and through the prism of a 20th century Reform rabbi? Any takers to read? Maggie, you're offering? Thank you.
Sure. Luria proposed that before creation, God's presence filled all space. In order to make room for the world, God had to withdraw from a finite amount of space. Luria called this voluntary act of divine self-withdrawal or self-concentration tzimtzum. Into this newly created void, God then shone or emanated a ray of light that arranged itself into the shape of the primordial human archetype, Adam Quad Kadmon, which is identical with the Sephirotic tree itself.
Great. Thank you, Maggie. Let's stop there. I know this is complicated. These are concepts. This is terminology. So let's break it down. So we'll start with the first part. So Luria's idea, and again, he's building on Kabbalah that came before him. He's building on the Sefirot. He's creating something new, but it's coming out of what's already existed in Jewish mystical tradition. So again, how does an infinite God create a finite world? That's what he's trying to address. How does an infinite God create a finite world? God had to withdraw a little bit of God's infinity. Now, that may not make logical sense, but stay with it. This is a myth. This is a visual image to help us understand how an infinite God creates a finite world. God has to, as an act of will, self-withdraw and, in a sense, create a little piece of finitude, of non-infinity, to allow a world to exist in that. So how does God do it? The only way we can do this is, again, through images. So picture space. As it said, God is filling all space. But then God retracts, contracts as an act of will, and within that space creates a place for the universe to exist. I know I'm mixing metaphors here because it's very difficult to talk about, but within God creates a space to pour light into. I'll tell you, the only way to describe it, forgive me, is a bagel. A bagel or a donut, right? A bagel or a donut has a hole in it. So what God did is created something in the center. So if God's like a circle, God creates a center where God isn't, and pours God energy out of that center to be able to pour light into that center to create a world. Are you with me so far? God's pouring God's light into the center of the bagel or the donut to create everything in the universe. And so it was a voluntary act of self-withdrawal, self-concentration. The Hebrew word is simsum, self-contraction, into this newly created void, that donut hole, that bagel hole. God then shone a ray of light that arranged itself into the shape of the first human being. So Adam Kadmon means primordial Adam. Remember, we said the Sefirot can be pictured as a human body. And you've got that language with Danny Matt and Art Green, right? Chesed is the right arm. Givorah is the left arm. Netzach is the right leg. Hod is the left leg. You've got, sexual organs. So the Sefirot are depicted in Kabbalah as this first human being. So God is pouring this light into the first human, the mythical human being, not Adam on earth and Gan Eden, but Adam writ large as the structure of the universe. Primordial Adam filling all space, but also the Sefirot. God is pouring light into the Sefirot. God is pouring light into this archetype of primordial Adam. So far, so good? Okay, something's going to go wrong. Something's going to go terribly wrong. So let's do second paragraph. Maggie, you want to continue?
Sure. Am I muted?
Well, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. This macro-human contained the seed for all subsequent creation, the souls of every creature yet to be born. To contain the light, God prepared vessels, kelim, but at this juncture a catastrophe happened. God had underestimated the power of the light, and the lower 7 of the 10 vessels shattered. This cataclysm Luria called Shevirat HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels. Instead of an orderly and perfect creation, the result was our present world, a heap of broken shards or klipot, each containing sparks or nitzotzot of the original divine light.
Okay, Maggie, your Hebrew is perfect. Your Hebrew is incredible. Well done. So let's backtrack a little bit and unpack this. So this macro human, the spherotic tree, those 10 spherot that we're looking at, where everything in the universe and every living being comes from, ultimately, because this is in God. This is God, the creator. We're all potentially there in the spherot. God's pouring this light in like a laser beam. But there need to be vessels to receive the light. But the vessels couldn't handle the power of God's light, because this is the first time God had created a physical world, right? An infant God's trying to create a physical world. What could go wrong? Well, apparently, according to Luria, a lot could go wrong. God's pouring this light into these vessels. These vessels can't contain it, and they shatter. And these vessels, as it says, shattering the 7 lower sphirot. So this is chesed, this is givurah, and everything below it. This is not keter or chokhmah or bina, but chesed, givurah on down. They cannot contain God's light. They shatter. And by shattering, they're bringing imperfection into the world. So when we talked about why is there evil in the world? We talked about it being an imbalance, too much givurah, too much anger, too much harsh judgment, too much fear. That is true. And Luria is also saying there is evil in the world because we live in a broken world. We live in an imperfect world. And it began within God. God could not create a perfect world. This is such a radical idea. This is such a powerful idea. That evil exists within God. Evil exists in the way God created the world, not purposely, by accident, because the infinite cannot be contained in the finite, not perfectly. And this is why there's evil in the world. This is why there's death. This is why there's decay. This is why there's illness. This is why there's violence. This is why there is all these things. Some of them are human creations. Some of them we can't lay at our footstep. They're part of a broken world. We live in a broken world. And some of it's not our doing. But that's not the end of the story. There is hope. There is hope. We haven't got to Tikkun. So any questions about, so the light's trapped in the broken vessels of the world, a metaphor. God's light, God's infinite light is trapped in the brokenness of this world. Make sense so far? Okay, let's see how we can make it better. So we want another taker, or Maggie, you want to continue? Anybody else like to read? Or Maggie, you're doing great.
I'm happy to continue.
Thank you.
According to Lurianic Kabbalah, the task of human beings and the purpose of the commandments, indeed the meaning of life, is to free the trapped sparks of light and thereby restore things to their originally intended plan, or using Lurianic imagery, to their original root. This act of world repair and restoration is called Tikkun Olam. Tikkun is messianic action wherein every deed contributes to the ultimate and sacred task of returning all things to their original place in God. Even the ineffable 4-letter name of God has been split in half by the breaking of the vessels and awaits tikkun to make it whole again.
Wow. What Isaac Luria did is, if people wonder, what's my purpose? Why are we here? If you've ever wondered that, why are human beings here on this earth? What is our purpose? Isaac Luria has an answer. His answer is, we are here to do mitzvot, to repair this broken world, and to be God's partners in the restoration of this world. He lived to be 38 years old, and he died in not a pandemic, but they called it an endemic in Sfat, Israel. I can only imagine what more teachings he would have left us if he had lived another 30 years. But the fact that he left us this at age 38 is remarkable. So let's unpack it a little bit. The task of human beings and the purpose of the commandments, indeed the meaning of life, is to free the trapped sparks of light, restore them to God's intended plan when God sent that light into the world. So again, being God's partners in the creation of the world, the maintenance of the world. Restore the light back to the original root meaning in God, in the higher Sefirot, or maybe in the infinite, the Ein Sof, maybe above the Sefirot. Tikkun is bringing the Messiah. It's making the world better. It's creating paradise on earth, wherein every deed contributes to the ultimate and sacred task of returning all things to God. That's what the mitzvot are meant to do in Kabbalah. The mitzvot are here by us doing them, to restore the world, to do tikkun olam, to repair God, to repair even God's four-letter name that was split in that original breaking of the vessels in Shvirat, the Shvirat HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels. So we'll go back to the question is, how could these radical ideas be accepted by mainstream Judaism? Because it leads back to the mitzvot. It's not saying do something else. I mean, you can do other things. You can do meditation. You can meditate on God's names. You could do permutations of God names. You could do prayers. You can do that. But it still leads back to doing the mitzvot in the Torah. But now doing mitzvot has cosmic significance. Not only does it have cosmic significance, it helps repair God's self. When we do a mitzvah, and this is again back to Gnosticism, as above, so below, or Neoplatonism, which is also part of these Kabbalistic ideas. As above, so below, and as below, so above. When we do something down here, again, to use the vertical metaphor, it can impact positively or negatively what is above. And what is above in this system is God. Also within, but we can still use the vertical metaphor. We don't have to give it up. So when we do mitzvot, we are affecting God in the Sefirot. We are repairing God's name. We are restoring the universe. We are restoring God to wholeness. Wow, talk about givurah. That is power. That is power. Our actions have power. Our actions can do all that. That's a powerful human being. So this was a very empowering idea to Jews who were just kicked out of Spain, which they were, to Jews who felt disempowered, who didn't understand why we were kicked out of Spain, what does this mean? Is God angry at us? Did we do something wrong? But let's talk about it for our own day. You know, can we think when we do a mitzvah that we're helping to repair the world? Certainly we feel it when we give tzedakah, right? Ruth, I'm sure what you described, the example that you gave of people being able to, you know, your sidewalk library, you know, you're providing learning and education and opportunities for somebody who may not have it potentially. That's repairing the world, making it better, making it more whole. We give tzedakah to people in need. When we do an act of gimilut chasadim, a deed of loving kindness. to somebody who is in need, we're certainly repairing and helping to repair their world. And as the Talmud says, to destroy a life is to destroy an entire world. To save a life, to help a life, is to save and to help an entire world. So when we do mitzvot, or do deeds of loving kindness, gemilut chasadim, we have the ability to make a tremendous impact and be God's partner. And now let's relate it then to care of the world, environmentalism. Arthur Green calls environmentalism, care of the world, the most important mitzvah of our time. Maggie, I know you would agree. I know Jan would agree. And maybe other people would agree too. If we had to choose one mitzvah right now that is the most important mitzvah to attend to and to do and to fulfill, one could argue taking care of this precious planet that is in danger because of human behavior, most scientists would argue, that is the greatest mitzvah of our time. That's real tikkun olam as well. Literally the repairing of our world, the planet, the earth, the sky, the water. I'm going to get off my soapbox. What do you all think of tikkun olam and this idea that the mitzvot, the practice, the traditional Jewish practice of doing mitzvot as an act of tikkun olam? Any thoughts, any ideas? Feel free to disagree with Isaac Luria. Yeah, Mike.
Well, I know you refer to this as a myth, but I love the imagery of it.
Yeah.
Especially the shattered vessels and that whole explanation, and it's like a complete thought. You know, in the past I thought, okay, tikkun olam is just a good thing to do, but this kind of brings relevance to it.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I use the word myth in the sense of nobody was there, nobody's asking for evidence. You know, it's a way to understand our world. It's a way to make sense of why there's evil in the world or why it's not a perfect world. It really does answer that question, as well as giving us a job to do in the repair of that. And yeah, it's sort of airtight in its, you know, if you accept its premises, the conclusions follow. It really, you know, it's all sort of airtight in its thinking. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. And yeah, it's a deeper way to understand tikkun olam. It really is. Yeah, Jill.
So I was going to say, just I was really loved what you shared. I was going to say that, you know, it's kind of a two-way street, because when you do something to repair the world, and like what Ruth was saying, you could see Ruth smiling while she was sharing what she did. You could see how good she felt inside.
Yeah.
So it goes both ways. You know, it reminds me, you know, when I was in college and I was studying theater, and they used to tell us, you know, as actors, you know, if you're nervous on stage, you need to, like, you know, sort of transfer it to the person you're working with, and that takes it away. And so by doing something nice for someone else, it really alleviates, it makes you feel so much better. So I think it's I think looking at it as just caring for the world makes it one directional, but it's, I don't know if that's the right way to say it. It's actually two dimensional, because because by doing that, it's self-care for us too. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yes. And again, back to the idea that we are all connected, that
Right.
we are one. If we are one, then if we really take that seriously, that means that what I do toward you, comes back to me in some way. That and Jill, you made me think of the idea too of how it comes back to you. It goes back to a question that was originally asked in the first one is, where's the joy in the Sefirot? The joy in the Sefirot is doing the mitzvot.
Mhm.
The joy in the Sefirot is our actions uniting the bride and the groom and bringing blessings into the world and bringing God's flow into the world. The joy is like what it says in the Psalms, to serve God with joy. So this is meant to be joyful, and the Chassids really take it to the next level when talking about joy and doing mitzvot, but it's all built into this. Yes, this is
Thank you,
meant
Rabbi.
to come back and to be joyful and we're spreading it around. It connects all of us. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Jill. That's a great point. So then just for further reading, just to complete the handout, let's see. You can see on your last page, I'm really recommending I want to encourage you to continue the study of this. We've really scratched the surface, but I think we've got some really good, practices and ways to understand the major principles and to go deeper into this. Art Green's book, Eheyeh, a Kabbalah for Tomorrow, is one of the best. If you're to choose one book to go to, I'd recommend this. He's really quite a gifted writer. He's quite poetic and very clear. And so if you want to start with the book, this is a good read. Eheyeh, a Kabbalah for Tomorrow by Art Green. If you want to sort of, I also think maybe the second book I'd recommend just to understand everything. I think Lawrence Kushner does a great job of explaining the major ideas. And then what Kushner does too in the way into Jewish mystical tradition, you see that little, what do you call that? Like a little medal or a little ribbon, or what do you call those things? A little medallion, a little medal.
Like a seal?
What? A seal?
Like a
Yeah.
seal?
Yeah. This was a finalist for the National Jewish Book Award. So this is a wonderful book too. Kushner in his own voice, he really explains things. But then what he does with each idea is he'll give you a text to then read it in the original. So it's a nice combination of understanding concepts and the way that he describes them. He's also a very good writer, and then also giving you the primary text to work from, whether it's Zohar or the Hasidic world or some of the other Kabbalistic texts. This would be book number 2, I think. The reason I recommend this one is it flows better. It's all a sort of a seamless read. This is a little bit more of like an anthology of teachings and texts. And then thirdly, Danny Matt's The Essential Kabbalah, which is an anthology of Kabbalistic texts with his footnotes to it in the back. He's got a great introduction of Kabbalah at the beginning. So all 3 are good, but that would be the order. If you're coming at this sort of new to Kabbalistic ideas, that would be the order I would suggest reading these books in. But I just one other caveat to saying that if you just want to get little bites of ideas and you could thumb through certain concepts, maybe the way into Jewish mystical tradition is to get smaller little bites or chunks of ideas, and then you can go further in it. So all good. All 3 are good. Any questions, comments, closing thoughts, or ideas? All right. Well, we covered a lot of territory. Jeffrey, are you raising your hand or you're?
I am. Rabbi, would you consider doing any more classes? You're doing a fantastic job.
Oh, thank you, Cindy. Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, I'd love to. Maybe we can revisit this, down the line. It's such rich and deep material. I mean, we really could have done a 10-week course and we could have gone through, maybe Lawrence Kushner's book and done it one chapter at a time. I think, what I'd love to do is just to expose people to other powerful Jewish ideas. So with Jill Nemiro and the Adult Ed Committee, we've created this Living Judaism class that's going to be once a month on a Sunday, and that's going to be a deep dive into other topics of interest. So for example, next month, we're going to be looking at prayer. And we're going to be looking at the structure of prayer, the content of Jewish prayer. If you're interested in leading Jewish prayer here at Temple Sinai, please join us for that, because when I go on vacation, would love to have you work with Cantor and be a co-leader if you're comfortable doing that. So join us for prayer next month, a deep dive in Living Judaism. We'll talk about prayer in an hour and a half. And then the following month in April, we'll talk about Jewish mourning customs and Jewish ethical wills. So want to just give us an opportunity to discuss other Jewish topics of interest. So our monthly Living Judaism will do that, as well as our journey through the Bible. We'll be journeying through the Bible and talking about concepts in that. And Jill, I know you've got a bunch of other great, Jill's got so many ideas in the Adult Ed Committee, have so many great Adult Ed programs. Want to allow for those also to have some space and manifest. So Jill, anything more to say about that, or?
Yeah, well, Ruth is coming back for an encore for her Wise Aging class, which is going to be great. Everybody loved it so much that she's coming back in March. And I'm not going to tell you the idea, but Ruth sent me a great idea today. So we will be updating that. I think the Cantor might be doing something for us. I've been hopefully, in maybe one or two sessions before she leaves. But if you have any ideas as well, actually we had a great presentation last night on, it was just so interesting. Seth, wouldn't you agree? I just thought it was really cool. And that came from a Temple member from Renee Steinberg, referred us to Jerry Irish. He said his name was without the I. So that's how I remembered it. But if you have any suggestions, please forward them to us and we will try to follow up on them. But really, all these great ideas are really coming from Temple members and from the committee. And tonight who's here tonight on the committee is Susan, who has been amazing, and Seth, who has been amazing, and Tina, who's amazing, and Ruth, who's just keeps us all, with a wealth of ideas. So I think I didn't miss anybody, Tina, did I, that's here tonight on the committee? So that's, and we have Isaac is on the committee and Kathy is on the committee. So we have a lot of really great people coming up with a lot of really good ideas. So thank you, Rabbi, so much for putting in a plug for us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a question was asked, and I see the hands too, but a question was asked about when the Jewish mourning customs and ethical will. That's going to be Sunday, April 24th. The prayer, looking at Jewish prayer, is March 27th. So that just so happens the next two Living Judaisms fall on the fourth Sunday in April from 10 to 11:30. Actually, it's going to be the fourth Sunday in May as well. So they're falling on fourth Sundays. Living Judaism class. We've got also the Journey Through the Bible. Check for when that falls on a Sunday in the month. We've got Lunch and Learn on the second Thursday of each month at 12 o'clock. And let's see, Susan and Seth, and before I forget, if you can all stay on, Steve Abrams made a great comment, and it's another practice we can think of when we think of Tikkun Olam. So let's do Susan, Seth, and then Steve's comment.
My comment was just going to be answering Seth, which you already did. I was just going to say it's the Living Judaism listing in April which is whatever date that was.
For the
So what's
Jewish
the May
mourning
one
festival.
going to be, Rabbi? Do you know May yet?
No, maybe the Adult Ed Committee can give me some ideas. So I would encourage you to send some ideas to the Adult Ed Committee, and I will also solicit ideas for the people who join in March and April for what are other topics you'd like to take a deep dive into. Thanks, Susan. Yes, Seth?
Well, you answered the question that I was going to ask because I didn't know that you saw it in the chat.
Okay, great.
So that's why
Thank
my
you.
hand was up.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Seth. And if I hopefully everybody saw Steve's comment in the chat, loves the imagery of how God withdraws from space. This is the same we do. We take as much space and give as much space as we need. Absolutely. This concept of Tzimtzum is a great form of leadership and a great way to relate to people. And leadership could be in your home. It could be with a person, a friend, an organization, whatever it is. But are you creating a space as the leader, as the person in your home or whatever, or relationship you're in? Are you creating a space for other people to express themselves, to manifest their attributes? So we want to constantly be doing self-contraction, constantly be making space for other people. So it's sort of the Tzimtzum of leadership or relationship, of making sure we're allowing enough space for others. I'll go back to Thich Nhat Hanh, the great spiritual teacher, who has this teaching about one of the ways we create happiness and goodness in the world is making sure we are giving enough space to others, and even saying to somebody, a loved one, am I giving you enough space? Do you have enough space where you're able to bring what you want to bring and be the best person that you want to be? And then that is Tzimtzum. So and that's, God is our model for that. So it's a pretty good model. So I want to thank you all. I'll express my Hod right now and my Hodaya and my gratitude. Thank you all for being a part of this. Thank you all for sharing with great comments, observations, questions. This has been very enriching. I hope it's been enriching for you. I really hope that the Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism is something that can enrich your life, because it really is very deep and powerful and meaningful. And so I hope these ideas continue to enrich your life, and that you continue to study and learn and practice, and we'll continue the conversation. So back, Cindy, we'll bring it back to you. This isn't the end of our conversation on Kabbalah, but we'll continue the conversation in various ways. So thank you all for being a part of the conversation. You add so much. And with that, why don't we unmute and wish each other good night, and we shall conclude our spirituality series.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank
you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Good night.
Thank you.
Welcome. You're most welcome. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank
you, Rabbi. Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
It's wonderful seeing everybody.